Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the CSMI radio broadcast, Today's Christian Music with James Burkhardt.
And good afternoon. With me on the phone is veteran Christian music singer and songwriter Bob Bennett, calling in from California. How are you, Bob?
I'm doing great, James. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this probably ever since I was asked to host the show. You're one of the guys I've always wanted to talk to. So it's, believe me, the privilege is all mine. So why don't we go back to the way beginning? I think you were in high school in Downey when you got a guitar and started to learn how to play and formed your first band. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that experience and then how you came to know the Lord and decide to use your gift for Christian things?
Well, actually, high school is where the band formation kind of dates. I had flirted with a little bit of, had an electric guitar from the swap meet and stuff like that, and got together with various groups of guys. But actually, I started playing guitar when I was 10 years old. I grew up listening to my brother's folk music collection, and so that really inspired me. Before there was ever a Beatles, I was listening to all the old popular folk music back in the day. And so I started playing at 10 and, doing stuff in and around school, taking my guitar out to the playground and playing at school assemblies and, and for my parents would, call me out into the living room sometimes and ask me to play and things like that. So I knew pretty early on that I wanted to play music. And my life took a turn that I was not expecting. As you've alluded to, there just came a certain point where going to church and the stories of the Gospels and things like that became something more than just, I have to do this. It became, I want to do this, and I need to, have Jesus be the Lord of my life on a regular, daily basis. That happened pretty seriously, I guess, in about 1977, what I jokingly call the Don't Miss the Rapture 70s. That was sort of the big thing that was going on back then. People were talking a lot about the end times. And accompanying that revival, which we now in retrospect sort of call the Jesus People movement, there was a rich and vast array of people that were making Christian-themed music using the musical language of their day. And so I was kind of the second wave of people that did that, but I was definitely, in on the earlier years. And so when I, came to faith, it was real natural that what was happening with a guitar in my hand would also reflect that faith.
Well, how did you manage to be friends with the guys from Isaac Air Freight? And you were obviously around Maranatha Music for a while, but you ended up with a record deal with Priority Records a few years later. How did that whole thing work out for you?
Well, in terms of my association with Isaac Air Freight, that part, Dan Ruppel, who's one of the co-founders of Isaac Air Freight, has literally also been my best friend since I was about 10 years old. We're talking we do the math on that. We're almost coming up on 55 years now that we've been close friends. He had formed a comedy team and was out doing sort of sketch comedy. This was during the heyday of SNL and, the beginnings of all of that. And they came to faith and said, in the same way that musicians say, I want to sing about Jesus, they said, I want to be funny for Jesus. And so that's how I got to know, that side of things. My association with Maranatha Music was just a natural outgrowth of my association with Calvary Chapel. I attended one of the sort of satellite churches, if you will, in Downey, California, and the main church with Pastor Chuck Smith was in Costa Mesa, and they held Saturday night concerts. And I started going out to the Saturday night concerts, and that was a big inspiration.
And who was the pastor at that time at Calvary Chapel in Downey?
Well, the founding pastor is a guy named Jeff Johnson, and he's been there ever since, and is such a faithful fellow. And it's the typical thing. They started out meeting in a teeny weeny little building, and then the buildings got larger, and the church got larger, and they finally bought an old, huge department store on the corner of big corner in kind of not quite an industrial area of Downey, but a big area, and built a church there. And that's where they've been, gosh, I want to say at least now for about 40 years, I think, in that one location.
Wow, that's a long time to be established. So you're known for writing very good lyrics and very good melodies. Do you have a particular way of writing your songs? Like words first or music first, or how does it happen?
Well, thank you first for that kind assessment. It kind of varies. In the beginning, I started writing with a guitar in my hand a lot, and the guitar would sort of suggest maybe what the song was going to sound like and what I wanted to write about. These days, I have a tendency to approach writing lyrics before I ever, start thinking about the music. And my cue, sometimes songs are very spontaneous. They kind of come out of nowhere. In that, 1 minute there is no song, and 20 minutes later there's a song. I don't think it's a matter of taking dictation or anything like that, but sometimes the Lord just blesses your creative impulses, and you can be very, very productive. Other times, songs take an awfully long time to develop. You may have an idea and bits of pieces of a song for years, if not a decade or more. That I have a couple songs like that actually took me about 10 years to figure out how to finish them. And but I love the process of songwriting, even though I struggle with it sometimes. I love the process. I love the compact nature of storytelling in a song. Is very attractive to me, not only as a music maker, but still, from an early age as a grateful listener. I just love music.
Well, that's really cool. What artists would you say have influenced both your music and your lyric writing through the years?
Well, I have, obviously, like everyone else, I've got the same list of suspects from people my age, kind of in the boomer category. It was the folk music, you remember all the groups that some of your listeners, your grandparents would probably know. The Kingston Trio, the Limelighters, Peter, Paul and Mary, the Weavers, the Journeymen, Brothers Four, Buffy St. Marie, Gordon Lightfoot, all that kind of stuff. Then the Beatles came along, and there was a huge seismic change with the Beatles, and bands like that. And then starting out, I think in the sort of the late 60s to early 70s, there was the heyday of singer-songwriters, Joni Mitchell, James Taylor, Stephen Bishop, Dan Fogelberg, people like that. When I became a little bit more conversant with Christian music, then at the beginning I was listening to all kinds of new stuff that I'd never really heard of before. It was a lot of the Maranatha bands because of my proximity to Calvary Chapel. There was, Karen Lafferty, Daniel Amos, Mustard Seed Faith, Parable, The Way. Then I found out about Phil Keaggy, Second Chapter of Acts, Randy Matthews, Larry Norman, Randy Stonehill, Mark Hurd, those kind of suspects. And then these days, I'm so fortunate to still have some pals that are kind of out there and still playing. So Scott Wesley Brown is a good friend. Bruce Carroll, Phil, of course, I don't see Phil very often, but I love that man. Phil Keaggy. Randy Stonehill is a friend from afar, and love him as well. So I'm happy to. I don't know him super well, but I love Brian Duncan and the work that he's still doing. And so it's gratifying to kind of look around and see, some of the gray-haired guys that are still out there, being faithful and making music.
Well, talk a little bit about what it's like to perform with the Killer Bees, which is Bruce Carroll and Scott Wesley Brown and yourself.
Well, it's a lot of fun. I got to tell you, the way this came about, James, was I was doing a concert, and it was actually in that iteration, it was me, Bruce Carroll, and Billy Sprague, who is just a wonderful artist and songwriter, and a friend of ours named Bob Lapine, who works with Family Radio and has had a show for many years on there, is a buddy of ours, and he dubbed us the Killer Bees, as in the letter B. And that stuck. It was just so cornball that we thought, oh, this is really fun. Let's just do it. So we called ourselves, with a wink and a nudge, we called ourselves the Killer Bees. And then these days, the third B has been Scott Wesley Brown. And I just love hanging out with. We have as much fun behind the scenes as we do anytime we are playing, in front of a group of people.
Well, as a songwriter, do you enjoy the freedom to record, a 4, 5, 6, 7-minute song, which is in vogue these days, as opposed to the early days when it was like, 2.5 minutes, or you're not going to get any airplay?
Well, I mean, I don't think I have any songs I only have one song that really clocks in at about 6 minutes. I have a song about the Gadarene demoniac called Man of the Tombs, and I just needed that much real estate to get the story told properly. But, my songs still are at the longest, they're maybe clocking it at 4 or 4.5 minutes if I have a nice instrumental break or something like that. But so I still kind of hew closer to, if for lack of a better term, a pop song format in that respect. I haven't really gone to the long form, but I know that with the advent of the CD and streaming and not necessarily being conformed to the constraints of a radio format, you're correct. You can get away with a lot of really cool stuff that wouldn't have flown 20, 25 years ago.
Yeah, I get that. And so if somebody wants to book Bob Bennett for a concert, what's the best way they can reach out to you these days? Website?
Well, the good news is, well, thank you. The good news is they're not going to get an agent or any third person. They're going to get me, and I don't want anybody to be intimidated by that. It's like, oh, I don't know, I don't want to bother him. Oh, please bother me. I want to be out there playing. It's my joy to do it. So, the best thing to do is to maybe navigate over to the website, bobbennett.com, which is just my name.com, BENNETT, bobbennett.com. Or you can, touch base on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or whatever, and then we'll probably switch over to a email and eventually a phone call or something. But I'm a one guy with a guitar, and I'm one round trip airfare away from almost anywhere. And in addition to doing churches and retreats and things like that, one of the things that I love doing these days is house concerts. And James, you're probably aware of this, but in the folk genre, this is very, very common. There are actually people who host concerts every month in their homes, like a monthly concert series, and trying to get booked into some of these private homes is almost like trying to get booked into a club or a theater or something. But now I go and do a lot of house concerts, and what I tell people, my brethren, is that it's basically like doing a home Bible study, except instead of a Bible study, I come and sing for you. And so I've had some great adventures going into people's homes, surprising people for birthdays and anniversaries and things like that. It's it's such a gratifying thing to be able to do.
That sounds awesome. What are some of your favorite house concerts that you've done in recent years? What did you get to go to Maui yet, or
no
exotic places?
I haven't been to Maui. Haven't been to Maui lately, but I'd love to go if anyone's listening. Well, there's a twofold answer to that. Some of the house concerts that I've done, when it's been a surprise, and usually, in fact, twice now, because twice now I've had somebody call me and say, I want to surprise my dad. My dad loves your music. I listened to your music growing up in the family car. Now I'm married and got kids of my own, but my dad has a birthday coming up, and we want to fly you in and have you play for him. And we've kept everything stealth. And then, Dad had no idea that I was coming to play a concert for him and his family. And those have been really fun. In the trade on those reality shows, they call it a reveal. And I've had some really fun Bob Bennett house concert reveals, if you will. The other thing that is a real honor and a real pleasure to do is I started a few years back going into situations in private homes where people were either very ill or maybe couldn't get out of the house, or perhaps even an end-of-life situation or something like that. And I call these house call concerts because I have explained to people that when I go to sing, I'm making a musical house call, much like a doctor might render medical help. I'm hoping to come and be an encouragement with my music. And I've had a couple situations where I've been able to play bedside for people in homes or hospitals or something like that. And the notion is, it's not that I wouldn't play for anybody. That's not the point. But usually this is someone who I have a history with them musically. They may know my songs, so it kind of means something that I showed up. And so it's as you might expect, on paper, I'm the one who's supposed to be doing the favor. But when I'm in that situation, it's really like being on holy ground. I mean, it's like giving a command performance for the Lord in person, to go into some of these situations and being a blessing to people in those circumstances and their friends and families. So that's a part of what I do, and something that, although I'm sometimes sad for the circumstances that I'm in, I'm happy to be helpful in those circumstances.
Well, that sounds like a real special ministry, and kudos to you for having that kind of a heart. I mean, that's really great. What?
I have a tendency to be as a lot of people. You try to hide it as best you can. You can be a little selfish, a little self-centered. So the Lord gets full credit for that one. For anything that I can manage that feels like generosity or something, that's absolutely due to the Lord.
Well, it's still a marvelous thing that you're able to do that. Do many of your house concerts resemble something back in the folk era called a hootenanny?
Well, yes. I mean, the hootenannies often involve groups of musicians, and they may pass the guitar around and so forth. But in the notion, the old quintessential thing of, you're kind of in the folk club, and the lights are dim, and all the chairs are facing forward, and everybody's listening intently on what you're doing. In that respect, a house concert often creates a very intimate listening room where everybody is really dialed in. And a lot of time, most of the time when I do these house concerts, James, I'm not even using a PA. I just walk into the house and start singing. And so it's, but yes, in the sense of that intimate folk club kind of thing, we're basically creating that in somebody's living room.
So it's back to the tradition of the Troubadour for you, huh?
Yeah, I think that's a very attractive and an honorable thing to do if you can. It's good work if you can get it. Let's put it that way. I always try to tell, and I have this luxury because I'm an acoustic guitar guy and an old folky and singer-songwriter, But I try to tell young parents that if you can expose your kids to music, live music, as early as possible, that's something to do. And then I try to encourage them, expose your kids to music that can survive and continue during a power failure. If you can get people in the room where they're making music that doesn't need electricity, your kids will probably catch the bug pretty early on for how wonderful music is.
Well, there's a lot to be said about, having a child involved in music because of the way it affects the brain and thinking patterns and all the synapses connecting and all that sort of thing. So what does the future hold for Bob Bennett? Where do you see things going for you?
I wish I had a wonderful and succinct answer of what I think that is, but I'm not sure. I'm actually, like everyone else in the known world now, I'm actually flirting with doing an occasional podcast because I used to, for a brief period in the late 80s, I actually music was a little bit on the back burner for a couple of years. And I actually co-hosted a radio talk show out here at a Los Angeles station with my friend Dan Ruppel. And we co-hosted a morning show. And I found out just how much fun it is to talk to people. I just have a curious streak anyway. So I'm actually, within a couple of weeks, I'm actually visiting a friend of mine who produces a very well-regarded podcast that his wife hosts. And he's going to sort of teach me the ropes of how to get started in this, and I'm going to launch in and see if I can't do it. I'm continuing to write songs and flirting with the idea that maybe I don't need to do a full album. The kids these days are just releasing 2 and 3 songs at a time. They're not necessarily thinking in terms of albums like you and I would be familiar with, 10, 12 new songs. So I'm flirting with that possibility a little bit. And just continuing to play live, because even though I enjoy all the expressions of recorded music, and I'm doing a lot of live streaming stuff too, I found out kind of by accident how much fun Facebook Live is. I can sit in my home office and put a few lights on and put a nice microphone in front of me, and I can play for an hour and a half, and I can have a couple thousand views within 2 or 3 hours of people checking into this music. So it's a wonderful way to have a larger reach than I would normally have. So I'd like to explore that technology a little bit more, being able to provide content to people that can't quite get to a concert, or it's a city that I can't get to, utilizing the technology that way.
Well, the internet is a wonderful place to play. So there's an awful lot of things an artist and a good creative entrepreneurial type can do with it. So, a podcast, you're just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about writing a book or doing anything literary, given your good use of the vocabulary?
I've thought about it, and I think with probably my reticence in this is that my writing history is so all over the map that I'm not sure how I would, unless I were just to write a huge memoir or something. I'm not really sure what I could write about. I for a while I was a columnist with a magazine that now has morphed into another magazine, and I'm not writing for them anymore. But at the time it was a magazine called Christian Musician, and I was writing columns for them about my various adventures in the arts and my thoughts about how to be an artist in the orbit of church and songwriting and different issues like that. And then I enjoy songwriting, and I just hosted a small song circle about a week ago with some young songwriting students, and I sat them down and played them a bunch of songs, not my own, played songs by other people, and we talked about why I respect and revere these, the craft of songwriting and what these songs did. And so I think for me, I just need to get a little bit of focus on what I can turn my attention to and then start doing it. But I've had that suggestion before, and I've certainly circled around the idea. I just haven't done anything about it yet.
Well, you got to check that out. You've exhibited through the years a staying power that a lot of people don't have. The average music career, even in Christian circles, is a lot shorter than 3 decades like yourself. So
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the youth-oriented, short attention span culture that I helped build brick by brick, I'm now kind of on the other side of that. So it's a very interesting time to be alive, because you want to try to, I mean, I'm not going to be anybody's Adele. That ship has sailed. I'm not going to get to be Jackson Brown Jr. or some of the things that I thought I might do when I was a young guy. But in this season of my life, what I love is just finding the people who still like this stuff and creating songs that hopefully will be good with them and for them. So there's a fellow named Seth Godin who talks an awful lot about finding your tribe, finding the people who are going to respond to what you're doing, and then, sort of having a covenant to be faithful and do good work for them. And so although I'm always happy to have new people come along, and it's wonderful when someone says, I don't know where I've been the last 40 years, but I didn't know you, and now I know you and I like you and all that. That's, of course, always fun. But it's also fun to run into people at concerts or online and have them say, I've been listening since your first album came out 40 years ago. I've been listening to this music, been listening to you, been praying for you. And so I just want to do good for them as long as I possibly can.
Well, that sounds perfect, Bob. And just one more time, why don't you go ahead and give your web address and how people can find you on social media?
Okay, very good. You can find me. My main website is bobbennett.com, and that's BOBBENNETT.com. My Facebook presence, my music page, you can still subscribe to. My personal page is full. I guess you can still do a thing called following rather than friending. All of that stuff sounds way too stalking for me sometimes. Would you like to friend me? Would you like to follow me? It just sounds funny to say it, but that's the language of social media. I've got a YouTube channel people can check out where I occasionally post my concerts and stuff like that. And I have an Instagram account that I don't know how to use very well, but you can also find me there. Twitter, Bob Bennett Tweet is my handle on Twitter. So those are some of the various places you can find me. And it's just a pleasure to talk to you, James. Thank you so much for letting me have a few words with you and by extension with your listening audience. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's been our pleasure for sure. And just if you can possibly answer this, it's the most impossible question I would ever ask anybody, but do you have a favorite Bob Bennett song?
Well, you know what? I actually have been asked that question enough that I have what sounds like a prefab answer, because I really have given the same answer many, many times. So if it sounds canned, I need to apologize in advance. But what I say when I'm asked this is that it's hard to pick a favorite song, just like it's hard to pick a favorite child. I mean, I have a relationship with all these songs. But if you said to me, Bob, what is the song that you hope outlives you? And what is the song that you hope is heard by the most amount of people? It would be a song that I wrote and recorded in 1989 called Man of the Tombs. And Man of the Tombs is a song about the Gadarene demoniac, the man who was in trouble. He was possessed by the legion of devils, and he had this very dramatic deliverance experience with the Lord Jesus. And it's a very, very dramatic story. And I wrote that song in a very severe time of my life when I felt very much like the Man of the Tombs. And so I think if I had one song that I hoped might sort of define why I write songs and why I do what I do, that would probably be it.
Well, thank you so much, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you. We wish you all the best, and we'll have you back on next year sometime. How's that sound?
All right, James. Thank you kindly. You take care, and you have a Merry Christmas as well.
Okay. Thanks, Bob. And we'll wish everybody Merry Christmas.
Okay. Thank you.
This has been the radio broadcast, Today's Christian Music with James Burkhardt. For more information about Christian songwriters and musicians international, please go to our website at www.csminetwork.com or email us at cwnnashville@gmail.com. God bless.